Part 27. The Impersonal Grid. Chapter 1. The Geometry of Silence. The city did not grow in the way a forest grows, with the messy, organic reach of roots and the soft compromise of foliage. Instead, it multiplied. It stretched across the horizon in a sequence of glass and steel, a cold and vast pattern that seemed to have been rendered by a machine rather than built by human hands, to look at it from above. If one could ever find a vantage point not obscured by the shimmering smog of progress, was to see a sharp design where human needs have been relegated to the far, dusty margins. Everything was calculated. Every alleyway was a byproduct of efficiency, every skyscraper a monument to a god of pure, unyielding logic. This was a future built atop the rubble of a broken past, beneath the feet of the millions who, scurried through the lower tiers, lay the pulverized remains of history, the brickwork of old tenements, the rotted wood of docks that once smelled of salt and trade, and the chaotic, winding markets of a century ago. All of it had been paved over with a grey, unyielding permanence. This was the geometry of the void, where the scale of the architecture was so immense that the individual was not merely small, but mathematically insignificant. Elara moved to the base of the central spires like a ghost haunting a motherboard. She felt the weight of the heights above her, the crushing symmetry of windows that looked out but never truly saw. The glass was polarized, reflecting only the sky or the neighboring towers, creating a hall of mirrors that hid the faces of those within. She was a single data point, navigating a vector, her boots clicking against the polished composite stone, a sound that was immediately swallowed by the ambient hum of the grid. In the city, the air itself felt processed. It was cold, recycled through massive subterranean filtration systems that stripped away the scent of rain or the smell of cooking food, replacing it with the sterile tang of ozone. Ilara pulled her collar tighter. Here, even the weather was a controlled variable. There were no seasons, only the constant, neon-lit twilight of the megalopolis. She looked up, trying to find a star, but the light pollution from the advertisement arrays, massive, hovering screens depicting smiling faces that didn't exist, made the sky look like a bruised purple ceiling. Chapter 2. The Automated Pulse. Deep within the veins of the city, the sound began. It was not the organic thrum of a living heart, but the insistent, percussive drive of a drum machine. It was a sound that originated from everywhere and nowhere, pulsing from the streetlights, vibrating through the floors of the transit hubs, and echoing off the metallic siding of the warehouses. It asserted a perfect time, a flawless and automated beat that dictated the movement of the masses. This was the rhythm of the grid. It was the cadence of a cold and loveless crime against the human spirit. There was no room for the hesitation of a human step or the syncopation of a wandering mind. To walk against the beat was to be a friction point in a world that demanded total fluidity. Under the flicker of neon signage that advertised things no one truly needed, the shuffle of moving feet mirrored this mechanical tempo. Thousands of commuters moved in synchronized desperation, their eyes fixed on the pavement, or the glowing rectangles in their palms. Elara felt the pulse in the marrow of her bones. It was a frequency designed to keep the heart rate steady and the mind focused on the next task, the next purchase, the next destination. They were the blood cells of a synthetic organism pushed through the corridors of the grid by a pressure they did not control. She watched a man trip near a subway entrance. He was back on his feet in a second, not because he was unhurt, but because the collective momentum of the crowd behind him would have crushed him if he stayed down. No one stopped to help. The rhythm did not allow for pauses. The drum machine was the city's true master. It eliminated the silence where thought might occur. It drowned out the sound of one's own breathing. Ilara tried to hum a melody she remembered from her childhood, something old, something with a flute and a soft, uneven tempo. But the beat of the grid rose up to meet her, a heavy thud-thud-thud that ironed out her song until it was just another part of the noise. The city didn't just house people, it processed them. Chapter 3. Reflections in Filtered Light. As Elara turned onto a main avenue, the sensory assault intensified. In this world, even the art had turned metallic. The sound of an electric guitar drifted from a hidden speaker, high on a concrete pillar, but it was a hollow imitation of music. It was filtered, clean, and sharp. It lacked the warmth of a wooden body or the grace of a trembling hand. It was a texture of pure electricity, a jagged edge that cut through the air without providing comfort. It was the sound of a machine trying to remember what a soul sounded like in failing. She moved through the avenues like a lonely blur. The vivid, empty scene was a masterpiece of artificiality. The glass facades of the skyscrapers reflected her back to herself, but the reflection was distorted. The angles of the buildings, designed for structural perfection rather than human aesthetics, stretched her image until she looked like a phantom. She saw herself in 1,000 panes of glass, a woman with tired eyes, and a coat that had seen better days, but none of the reflections felt like her. They were just more data for the city to absorb. The city did not want to see Ilara. It only wanted to use her motion to justify its own existence. It needed her to walk, to consume, to occupy space. The vivid lights of the advertisements, massive holographic displays of soft-skinned models and unreachable paradises, only served to highlight the profound emptiness of the streets they illuminated. A giant blue face hovered over the intersection, its eyes 5 stories tall, blinking with a programmed kindness that made Illyra's skin crawl. She stopped in front of a fountain made of polished chrome. Instead of water, it moved liquid light in a series of programmed cascades. It was beautiful in a way that felt like a threat. It was perfect, and because it was perfect, it was dead. There were no weeds growing in the cracks of the pavement here. There were no pigeons or stray cats. The grid had accounted for every biological variable, and it had decided that life was too messy for the design. Ilara touched the chrome of the fountain. It was freezing, a temperature that stole the heat from her fingertips and gave nothing back. Chapter 4. The Geometry of Purpose. The heavy pulse of the system held Ilara small. It was an invisible pressure, the weight of 1,000 rules and 1,000,000 calculations that determined where she could stand, how fast she could walk, and what she was worth. This was the geometry where purpose started to fade. In a world designed for the flow of capital and the maintenance of the grid, the why of human existence was a glitch in the software, a remnant of a bygone era that the city was slowly, methodically, editing out. She reached a massive plaza where 4 major avenues intersected. Here, the scale of the impersonal grid was at its most terrifying. The buildings rose so high they seemed to lean toward one another, blotting out the artificial twilight. The concrete was vast and unbroken, a desert of gray stone, where the wind whistled with a metallic shriek. There was a terrifying realization in the silence of the concrete. The city had established a rule that required no enforcement. It was the rule of indifference. Ilara stood in the center of the plaza and closed her eyes. She felt the vibrations of the subtrains miles below, the hum of the servers in the basements of the banks, and the rustle of 1,000,000 synthetic fabrics. She realized that no one would notice if she stood or if she fell. If she were to collapse right now, the crowd would part around her like water around a stone, their eyes fixed on the horizon, their feet keeping the beat of the drum machine. The concrete city made a silent rule: you are only as real as your function. Without a job to go to, or a credit line to spend, you became invisible. You became a ghost in the machine. Ilara felt her purpose slipping away, dissolving into the sharp lines and cold textures of the environment. The geometry of the city was designed to make one feel exactly this way, microscopic, replaceable, and utterly alone. As she began to walk again, her movement was no longer her own. She was being pulled along by the current of the grid, a single spark in a vacuum, struggling to remain lit. She looked at her hands, half expecting them to turn into glass or steel. The city was winning. The patterns were taking over. She was becoming another line in the design, another beat in the automated rhythm, another blur in the vivid, empty scene. The sun, if it was even there, did not set. The lights just grew brighter, the drum machine grew louder, and the impersonal grid continued its endless expansion into the night. Chapter 5. The Final Measure. As the hours bled into one another, Ilara found herself at the edge of the residential sector, where the units were stacked like cells in a hive. Each window was identical. Each door was a slab of grey composite. There were no gardens here, no porches where neighbors might speak. The architectural philosophy was one of total containment. She thought of the broken past, the stories her grandfather told of neighborhoods where people knew the names of the children 3 houses down. In the grid, such a concept was a security risk and inefficiency. The city had solved the problem of human conflict by removing the humanity. If no one knew anyone, no one could disagree. If no one spoke, There was no noise to interfere with the drum machine. As perfect time. Ilara reached her door and placed her palm against the scanner. It hummed, a sharp, electronic chirp that signaled her entry. Inside, the room was a reflection of the city, clean, sharp, and lacking any grace. The walls were a neutral white, the furniture was bolted to the floor, and the window looked out onto another wall of windows. She sat on the edge of her bed, the heavy pulse of the city still vibrating through the floorboards. She was a part of the pattern now, a small, quiet piece of the machine. The cost of the future was her identity, paid in installments every time she followed the rhythm, every time she accepted the filtered light, every time she remained silent in the face of the concrete rule. The city spread outside, a pattern cold and vast, waiting for the next day to begin, waiting for the next generation of ghosts to fill its streets. Ilara lay back and closed her eyes, and as she drifted into a shallow, fitful sleep, her heart began to beat in time with the drum machine. No forest grows within this steel design, where glass and metal stretch in rigid rows. The human heart is pushed across the line, as cold efficiency forever grows. Beneath the gray and unyielding paved floor, the rubble of a broken past is laid. The ancient wood and brick exist no more. In shadows where the individual will fade, a drum machine dictates the city's beat, a pulse that keeps the weary masses moving. No room for wandering minds or heavy feet. The grid demands a rhythm, unapproving. She disappears into the filtered light, a ghost within a world of chrome and stone. The patterns bloom throughout the neon night, to leave her feeling hollow and alone.